thank you all for being here. It's super cozy in here, isn't it? Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak to you and hopefully to get to share a little bit with you of my experiences. Just on the topic that we're talking about today, I was sort of asked to prepare a presentation for postgraduate researchers, or if I lapse into using the acronym HDR, it's out of habit because in where I come from, what you call postgraduate researchers, we call high degree researchers, and HDR is the acronym that just rolls off the tongue. So please forgive me if I use that acronym. But I'll tell you a little bit about myself and hopefully learn a little bit about you. And can I just start with that, actually? How are you all PhD researchers? Yeah. Yep. And just to get an idea of how far along you are, again, at my institution and most Australian institutions, after 1 year of full-time study, you go through what's called a confirmation, where you make a presentation and prepare a paper that is essentially a research proposal that gets examined, after which, all going well, you get confirmed as a candidate. You may have a similar setup here, I'm guessing. How many of you have passed that milestone of confirmation? So many of you, not all. Okay, great. So we've got people who are sort of at various points of the journey, and sorry to use that cliched term, but it truly is a journey. And I'll, as I said, I'll share a little bit of my journey with you, and harking all the way back to my PhD about 500 years ago. So the title of the presentation, How to Bite Your Tongue and Smile at the Same Time, and ideas on responding to reviewers and examiners. What I'm sharing with you is the actual documents I'm going to share with you are actually in response to reviewers. You will all be going through a process at some point in the not too distant future where you're responding to examiners. So where I'm talking about reviewers here, also think, well, how might this apply to examiners? Can I use the same principles? And in most respects, you can. Where I talk about an editor-in-chief, you might be talking about the chair of the examination committee. Where I talk about reviewers, you might be thinking about examiners. That being said, you also need to be starting to think about, if I'm assuming that many of you are already going through this process of dealing with reviewers and submitting manuscripts to journals for publication. So, yeah, as I said, to a certain extent, use those terms interchangeably. They're not exactly interchangeable, but you can sort of make that analogy close enough. So structurally, I haven't made this presentation before, so I'm not sure it's going to go a whole hour. Feel free to ask throughout. If you do have questions, I've got my final slide asks for questions, but if you have questions throughout, I'm not precious about that sort of thing. So, please just wave your hand or sing out. Yeah, I'll go through an introduction, then we'll get into the editorial process and what goes on there, and getting into the psyche of your handling editor. And a lot of this is, there is a psychology here to play with. Developing an action plan, and then this sounds counterproductive, I know, but it's not. This last point, rejections, we all deal with them. We all get them at some point. So it's important to dwell on that, to think about it, and to have a mindset going into it as to how you're going to handle that. Just firstly, a little bit again about my background and where I'm from. This is my institution, Bond University. It's on the city, or in the city of Gold Coast, in the bottom corner of Queensland, the southeast corner. My building is kind of shielded there. It's down in behind there. But it's compared to Loughborough, it's tiny. Our university, we were the first private university in Australia. I think there's another two now. But most universities, there's 45 universities in Australia. We carved out our own niche as a private. We have an accelerated program for undergraduates where they do what is a 3-year degree in public universities. They do it in 2 years at our university. Same amount of work, just not as many holidays. So instead of 2 months between semesters, they have 2 to 3 weeks. So it turns around quite quickly. I've worked at Bond University now for 13 years or 14 years. Prior to that, I worked at a public university about a half hour up the road at Griffith University. I used to think I was busy there, but yeah, I didn't know busy until I got to Bond. But it's a great place to work. There's a really nice culture. Part of being a smaller university is that we can sort of stake out our own territory. So we have set ourselves a limit where we do not want to grow above 5,000 students. We're at about 5,000 now. So it is a quite small niche university. We purposely don't do any of the big degrees like nursing, teaching. We have professional degrees. I'm in the business school. We have a law school, school of health and medicine, and then another faculty called Society and Design, where we have architecture, media studies, and psychology randomly is in that faculty. I've never quite worked that one out, but yeah, so we're a smaller niche university, but still we do punch above our weight. For the last 15 years, we've been rated #1 in the country as far as student experience goes. So it's a very consistent emphasis there on student experience. Research-wise, we are known as a teaching institution. However, there is still the expectation, as with all academics, we're supposed to be all things to all people and to produce research as well. So there is still, although our emphasis is on student experience and teaching, there is still an expectation to produce research. Yeah. Any of you been to the Gold Coast before? Or some of you might have heard of Surfers Paradise. It's just a suburb of the Gold Coast. People think that the two are synonymous, but they're not. Surfers Paradise is that sort of concrete jungle up there that's really just sort of the touristy end of town. I could count on one hand the number of times I go there within a year. I sort of avoid the place. But yeah, it's a nice place to live and work. It's quite soggy at the moment. I spoke to my wife a little bit earlier, and she said, "You're not missing anything here. It's wet and soggy." And I said, "Oh, fine, it's here too." But yeah, I left winter over there, and it's about 5 degrees warmer than it is here at the moment in summer. But no, it's nice to be in some seasonal weather. So this is my wife and daughter. I'm just giving you a bit of background of who I am and where I come from, guys. So bear with me. This is about 200 meters from my front doorstep, and that's looking north. That's looking south from the same position. That was the weekend, Sunday before I left. I'm a bit of a photography nerd as well. But yeah, Burleigh Heads. I'm only sort of 10 or 15 minutes, depending on traffic from campus. So yeah, that's a glimpse of the Gold Coast. That was a sunrise, by the way. So we face east on the east coast. So introduction. So on with the guts of the presentation now. So I was conscious and expecting an international audience, and I'm pretty sure I've got that in the room, and I'm sure online as well. Have there been some questions there?
Not yet. I'm sure.
I've just heard a few beeps. Yeah, I was conscious of the fact that maybe you might look at that and go, what does he mean? Smile and biting your tongue. So the expression to bite your tongue, what does it mean?
Yeah. To not say something when you feel like you want to say something.
Yeah. So you're sort of going, oh, I think you're wrong, but I don't want to say that. I think you're full of it, but I better not say that. So you sort of have to bite your tongue. So that's all you can do to hold back from saying, no, you're wrong. That's not going to get you anywhere here. So you do have to kind of bite your tongue and find a polite way to say, well, actually, if we think about it this way, so it's all about sort of still trying to get your point across. You don't need to roll over and play dead, not at all. Remember, you were all doing PhDs. You are the experts in what you're doing. With my PhD students, I'll often say to them, look, you're going to learn a whole lot about not very much. You are going to become the world's leading expert on your particular area of study. So you know your stuff. Have confidence in that. Reviewers, examiners, editors don't know as much about your work as you do. So have confidence in that. There will be times where you do need to bite your tongue. A little bit on my research, on my sort of background of how I came to where I am now. So a failed professional rugby league career, where I came out of high school as the next big thing in playing professional rugby league. It didn't quite pan out that way through injury, bad luck, and maybe lack of ability. I don't know, but I then sort of had to think, oh, okay, so I'm not going to play for Australia and set the world on fire in playing professional rugby league. What will I do? So meanwhile, I entered into a teaching degree. So I was studying to be a teacher. So okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I say there that professional rugby league career not working out led to this Forrest Gump-like trajectory. Are you all familiar with the movie Forrest Gump? So that sort of led me to focusing on my study and thinking about other things. And I ended up going to a university in Southern California. I was at a university in Australia, Australian Catholic University in Sydney, and I ended up getting an offer to go and play rugby union, which is a slightly different game to rugby league, in the United States, in Southern California, and finish off my degree over there. So I had about 1.5 years of study left to do, and so I spent 3 years doing that 1.5 years of study in the US, looking as a early 20s person does. I did my study, but I also traveled a bit and played rugby and had a good time, basically. But what it did, it gave me a taste. That was my first experience going. I'd been to New Zealand before, but we don't really count that in Australia. I can say that. I hope there's no New Zealanders in here, but New Zealand is a different country, but it's very close to Australia. But that was my first travel experience, and it gave me a taste for it. So I finished my degree, I came back, I was teaching for a few years. I knew I didn't want to stay as a school teacher, and I'd always been good at writing. So I figured I'd go back to study, and I got the opportunity to do that. And I ended up going to signing on with a professor at University of Alberta in Canada, and I was meant to start. I think it was late 90s, but I was meant to start in September. He called me in Easter and said, "I've got news. I've resigned from University of Alberta." And I said, "Oh, really?" I was looking forward to a nice big North American university again. He said, "But taken a job in England at De Montfort University, and I've organised a scholarship for you. Okay, I've never been to England before. Why not? You know, so because it is all about who you do your PhD with, rather than where, really, isn't it? And I didn't fully appreciate it at the time, but this supervisor, a gentleman named Trevor Slack, happened to be, if not the top person in the world, one of the top 3 people in the world to study sport management with. So I, Forrest Gumped my way into being with a leader, and doing my PhD at De Montfort University, which took me 3 years, 8 months, and 12 days. Yes, I was counting. So, and then ultimately I got a job after that, back in Australia, at Griffith University, which I stayed at for 12 years, and I've now been at Bond University for 13 or 14, I'm not exactly sure. So I'm a sport management scholar. Please don't let that put you off if you have nothing to do with sport or sport management. What I'm presenting to you today doesn't really, my topic area is immaterial. It's the process that we're talking about. It's the approach, the attitude, the mindset that we're talking about here. So I had 3 main research streams: organizational change, event leverage, and surf tourism. Each of those areas, we try to find our research niche in areas that resonate with us in some way personally, that we're passionate about, or that generally interest us, because you live and breathe this for 3 or 4 years, so it's got to be something that you're interested in. I happened to land in England the same year as rugby union went professional after 126 years of amateur operation. All of a sudden, the game went professional, and in the home of the game, England. So it was the perfect opportunity to look at the management of organisational change. So that's what I based my PhD around. But after that, I sort of got involved with, when back in Australia, with some colleagues who were more into other areas that influenced me down this area of sport for development. So all of my interests around organisational change is really about organisation theory, institutional theory. I kind of directed all of those to this area of sport for development, which is essentially what does sport do for the community? How does it help the community? So my research area is not about putting bums on seats at a stadium. It's more about the sociology of sports, social impacts, economic impacts, sustainability issues. The presentation that I'm making on the 24th is about how surf tourism in Papua New Guinea is being used to combat gender-based violence. Yeah. That's a program that's been rolled out nationally in Papua New Guinea, and they're looking at international. So that's my approach to sport. So it's not sort of a Jerry Maguire sort of. That's not what that's part of sport management, but not all of it. So far, I've published a few journal articles, books, book chapters, industry reports, and conference presentations. I supervised 18 high degree HDR students, postgraduate researchers, 12 PhD, 6 honours students. I've got 4 going at the moment, and I've examined a bunch of PhD theses as well over my time. So I'm using a lot of that sort of experience, and the experience of colleagues, from talking to colleagues over the years, in what I'm sharing with you today. The last 4 years, I've also been the HDR director in the Bond Business School, responsible for 50-odd PhD students that we have in our faculty. And that's been a challenging job. Not so much the students, it's more the egos of the supervisors that has been the hardest part of the job. But that's a whole other story that I won't even touch. I did touch it, but I won't go on with it. Also been on a few editorial boards. Currently, I'm on 3. I've been on others over the years. I've done also ad hoc reviews where I'm not on the editorial board, but you still get asked to review particular articles. I spent 3 years as associate editor of Sport Management Review, which is the highest impact journal in sport management. So it was a good one to be a part of, and it was a great learning experience for me as well. So that's the background and the experience that I'm bringing to this. A little bit more on this. The system that I'm going to share with you is it's based on the best part of 30 years of doing this. Working with, as I said, a great PhD supervisor and supervisory team, and then some fantastic colleagues over the years that I've learned from and worked with. My perspective is mostly limited to qualitative organizational studies, qualitative research. That doesn't really matter. I'm guessing that a lot of you are mixed methods and quantitative as well. Again, what I'm sharing with you, it doesn't matter either way. This is just some of so qualitatively, we do interviews. So this was an interview with, I don't know if any of you are familiar with surf parks, artificial wave generation. It's about making waves, surfing waves artificially. It can be done here. In the UK, you had the world's first commercial surf park up in Dolgarrog in North Wales. This weekend, I'm going to one down in Bristol, which was the 3rd surf park in the world. So it's just like, you go to a ice skating rink and you pay for an hour to skate on the artificial ice. This is artificial surf. So that gentleman, that was in San Sebastian, just outside of San Sebastian in Spain. He was Jose Maria. Oh no, his name was Olafable. I can't remember his first name, but he was one of the inventors behind this. So, qualitative research is about doing interviews on focus groups. That is the Netherlands women's sevens rugby team, and that was in Hong Kong, where we did some work for the International Rugby Board, or World Rugby as it's known now. Top left, I'm the one who's got the nice yellow flip-flops, if you can't work out which one I am. And I'm guessing that I'm probably, I don't know for sure, but I'm probably the only research fellow this week to be putting up topless pictures of themselves. I have to check that though. But that's working in Papua New Guinea, working in some of the remote communities there where surfing is used as an intervention. It's used to build community infrastructure, aid post-water reticulation projects, schools, religious facilities, money from surfing funds, all of that. That's, again, part of my research. And as I said throughout the presentation, where I use the term editor, reviewer, working examiner, as and where it applies. And of course, part of qualitative research is participant observation. So I do get to surf in these places. So the PhD graduates necessarily need peer-reviewed publications to be employed in academia. Sorry, I need water. Question. You all come from obviously very different fields that I won't go through individually, but by and large, if you want a career in academia, you pretty much do need to be publishing. In fact, they're practically essential in most fields. Please forgive me if in your field it's not so much. But in most fields, they're practically essential. It's incredibly competitive in academic job markets, whether you're talking tenure track positions or you're looking at research fellowships. It's incredibly competitive. Search committees are looking for that demonstrated ability to generate and disseminate new knowledge. So, hopefully you're looking at 1 to 2 peer-reviewed publications minimum from your PhD thesis. I don't know about this institution, but many institutions now allow you to go through PhD by publication. And that's not a bad approach, because what it does, if you get to the end of your PhD and you've got, say, 3 publications, how it works at my institution is that you then do an exegesis, a front end introduction, back end conclusion that ties it all together of what you found. And essentially that goes to the examiners, with the 3 publications and where they've been published, explained, but they're interlinking, they're tied together by this overarching research aim. And essentially, it's already been through an examination process, because if you're getting published in, higher tier journals, you've got experts in the field saying, yeah, this is good enough to be published. So when it goes to the examiners, who are they to say, no? So it's unlikely that you're going to have any problems if you've gone through that route. So that is a good way to go. Equally, if you don't go that route and you go through a more traditional route where you might have 3 core chapters of findings with maybe 3 sort of sub-research questions, that again lends itself to maybe 3 discrete publications, as and when you're able to do it. But try to look at your PhD and mine it for, okay, as you're going through it, how can I pull out some publications here? And it is kind of hard, because you might pull out one section and you think, wow, can I talk about that without that bit over there? So it's not as easy as it sounds. So, but do start thinking about that if you haven't. So where I'm coming at with this presentation is from the perspective of, you've submitted a manuscript and you've got over the first hurdle and you've got to revise and resubmit. Okay, so we're assuming that's where you're at. So the editorial process, what does it look like? So you submit your manuscript to the journal. It goes through their administrative people who do plagiarism checks, etc. And then it goes to the editor-in-chief. From the editor-in-chief, it will then be handed on to, usually in most journals, it'll be assigned to an associate editor. They'll usually have sort of a team of associate editors spread geographically or by different cognate areas within your field. And it'll be assigned to one of those. That handling editor will then try to identify 2 to 4 reviewers. Some journals go to 2, some 3. Sometimes they have to go to a 4th because 1 or 2 can't do a review for whatever reason. But they'll keep going till they get 2 to 4 reviewers who say that they're able to do it. Usually at least one of them will be on the editorial board. And it's always a good idea to have a look at who is on the editorial board of journals that you're submitting to, because you might see names on there, you think, oh, I've seen that name, I've referenced that person's work. If you're submitting to that journal, there's a very good chance that your manuscript is going to go to that board member. So it may behoove you to go back in and maybe reference them a little bit more. Go into their work and find out, is there something else here that I am missing? Some of this is ego stroking. Yes, that is true, but it's also pragmatic, because if they're recognized enough to be on the editorial board of that journal, they must have done some good work. So it's really a good idea to, if you're submitting to that journal, to make sure you're familiar with their work. And if there's anything that you can reference there, try to make sure that you do work it in. Where they don't have editorial board members to cover, ideally all editorial board members will be your reviewers. That's not always the case. Often they'll go to ad hoc reviewers. So they're people who are not on the board, They just get sent a manuscript and, hey, can you review this manuscript? Have any of you actually done a review on a manuscript? Yeah, yeah, it's a good experience, and if you do get the opportunity to, or get asked to do a review on a manuscript, take it on, because it's good to go through it from the other side. Did you find it a good learning experience?
Yeah, I've done about 20 years.
Oh wow, yeah, you're an old hand. Fantastic. So informed by the reviewer's feedback, the editors will issue a decision of either desk rejection, which is when it doesn't even get to the reviewers. I'll talk about that in a moment, or revise and resubmit with minor alterations, or more commonly, major alterations. Very rarely, I've only ever heard of it once. I'm sure it's happened more than that, but personally, I've only ever heard of an outright acceptance straight off the bat once. And that was one of my PhD supervisors 30 odd years ago. I've never heard of it since. Yeah, that is very much the exception to the rule. So I don't share this with you to be a negative Nelly or to be a wet blanket or to be discouraging. This is the reality. But in your top journals, in all of your fields, you'll have your higher tier journals. In my field and in business generally, we talk about Q1, Q2 journals. We have in Australia, and it's used internationally as a ranking system, the Australian Business Deans Council ranking of journals, ABDC, and they have A star, which is the top, A and B journals, level journals. So the journals are ranked. In the top ones, up to 70% of them don't even get to the review process because they get desk rejected by the editor or the editor-in-chief or a handling editor. Ultimately, only 3 to 5% of submissions get published in the top journals. So that sounds incredibly discouraging, but wait, there's more. This is a journal that I've worked with. So in 2024, one of our highest ranked journals throughout the year had 526 submissions. Of those 526, 34 got published. So only 6% of the submissions in 2024 to this journal, which is one of our highest ranked ones, got made it into print. However, question, must you only target the top journals? I'm actually asking this to you.
No,
Why?
yes.
That's a very good answer to no, but yes, yeah, for sure. You say no?
No, because sometimes just spending too much time on wanting to get something published there, you miss the time and opportunity to publish your work so that a larger audience can see.
Yeah.
Let's say you publish in a Q2 journal rather than a Q1 journal.
Yeah.
And it helps you to secure a job or a position or a funding or
100%. And do you want to add to that?
I think so, especially when you're at an early career, you want to try
Yes.
to get to the Q2s first, but then also slowly build up to get to the Q1.
100%, absolutely. And the same goes for book chapters. Quite often, maybe your supervisors will get approached. Oh, could you contribute a chapter to this edited book? And a lot of academics go, well, book chapter, I don't get the same brownie points as I would and it's the same time commitment or similar time commitment to writing an academic journal article. But it depends where you're at in your career. Obviously, the higher ranked journal, the higher profile, the better. But, as you said, it is good to get your work out there as well. So yeah, don't frown at the lower ranked journals as well. Obviously go as shoot as high as you can. But don't turn your nose up at a Q2 or a B journal or the equivalent in your field, because, it's about, creating that profile, getting your work out there, particularly if your work is edgy, maybe it's new, it's a new way of approaching something, or it's very innovative. They might not be as enthusiastic about publishing it even in the higher ranked journals.
Better to have something rather than having nothing.
Yeah, exactly. So, don't be put off by these stats, and quite often people are. They look at it and go, "What's the point?" So the moral of
Sorry, that's me. You have a question online as
Oh,
well.
sorry.
Well,
Okay.
a comment rather.
Yep.
Do you want to-
So question.
this one and then this one.
So the question: we don't need to target top journals, considering how colonized these knowledge systems are. For sure, research on anything race adjacent is systematically rejected to begin with. Top journal in our field is more general, therefore reframing the message for that reduces our chance in more technology specific journals that are slightly lower ranked. Yeah. So, again, that reinforces what we're saying here, that, it's don't, write these journals off if they're not, the Q1s and so on. So the moral of the story: control what you can control, not like this guy. Have no control whatsoever. So what can you control? You can target the right journal, and right inverted commas, right for you. In the right journal being your particular field and at the level that you want, and you think it's got a realistic chance of getting published, and having the right, again, inverted commas, people reading it. Be cognizant of word limits. If you send in a manuscript that's 12,000 words long and they have an 8,000 word limit, most of them are around 10,000. That's immediately, sorry, see you later. It's an easy one to get rid of. So be cognizant of that. Make sure your writing is crisp and mistake-free. Again, in the age of AI, and I'm not going to even get into AI because I'm no expert there, but we really have no excuse for grammatical errors and spelling errors and so on. This is a big one, and I probably should have put it in a different color or bold. State your novelty and your contribution succinctly and upfront in your abstract and in your introduction, so that you're hitting the editor and the reviewers between the eyes with, this is why this is important. This adds this new knowledge to our field that is desperately in need. I'm filling a gap, so really make that loud, proud, and undeniable. Again, I can think of manuscripts where, you get to the end of the introduction, you think, what's the research question? Well, the research question doesn't come until page 5, and you're midway through page 3, you think, why am I reading this? So you've got to get that, you've got to be crisp. You've got to hit people between the eyes with what you're talking about and why it's important. So after issuing that decision of revise and resubmit, handling editors, they're motivated to guide these manuscripts through to publication. They want to get through to acceptance, but otherwise a desk rejection is the most efficient decision. But a lot of authors treat the reviewers as sort of, the ultimate authorities, but really you're having a discussion with the editor through the reviewers. So always speak to your editor through your responses to feedback, because it's the editor-in-chief who is the ultimate authority on your manuscript. Sometimes they'll pick up things that the reviewers don't. So I'll elaborate on that as we go through the rest of this. So action plan. You've got your decision letter. So you've submitted your manuscript, it's been accepted. hasn't been rejected, it's been accepted, it's been sent out for review, and you've got your decision letter back. So first step, read the decision letter and reviews and populate your response template. I've got that because I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a moment, and send it to your co-authors if you have any. Then just celebrate and sleep on it. Like, read it, think, okay, cool. Don't ruminate on it too much yet. Great. Through the first hurdle. Sleep on it for at least one night. Then the magic starts to happen. You start to ideate and think, oh, how am I going to respond here? Individually, if you've got an authorship team of you and your primary and associate supervisor maybe, or there's in some fields, in my field, there's usually 2 or 3 authors of a manuscript. In some of the sciences, there can be authorship teams of 15 and more. So it varies from field to field, but authors individually think about how they're going to respond to each comment. And then they confer. After they've done individual thinking, then they confer and meet and discuss the best way forward and who's going to do what and how will we approach this. Next step, 5, we make the revisions, progressively responding to each and every comment in the response template. I keep using that term, response template. I'm getting to that. And then we've done the revisions as the lead author. And I don't know about you and your situation, but for me, and with my PhD students, and this is what my PhD supervisor did with me, he always said, you're the one collecting the data, you're the one writing the first draft, you're the lead author. So, to me, that's the fairest thing. So whenever I publish with my PhD students, they are the lead author. So again, it's up to them to do this final edit and to ensure responses are meaningfully addressing each and every comment. And that last step, update the quotes, update the page and line references that you're talking about with the reviewers. And then resubmit, celebrate again, and take a well-earned rest. And then we wait for it to come back. But let's unpack that process of responding. So this is what I mean by a response template. Don't just write it out in a Word document without a table. What do you think is the advantage of doing it like this? Rather than just...
It makes it easier for the editor to see what has been done. So this is the point where we're speaking to the editor.
Correct. So you're making it absolutely dead simple for them to see, okay, there's that comment, response, alteration, response, alteration. So it is plain as day. There's nothing left to chance. So in this first column, copy and paste every single feedback comment from the decision letter. Be meticulous. Don't leave any comments out. Don't ignore the polite preamble comments because they're very useful if you use them in the right way. It's all about the framing. I'll come back to that point. So that's this column. You've got the editor, 1 or 2 comments, reviewers, could be 30, 40 comments, reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3, if there's a third one. The middle column, in this column, explain how you've interpreted and addressed each individual point of feedback. So this is the feedback. This is your response to that feedback comment. And in this column, these are the alterations in the manuscript. So, you might refer them to page 15, paragraph 4, line 3. Be that specific. I'll show you a manuscript shortly where I actually number all of my lines, 1 through to 800 or whatever. So I can refer them to, please see lines 67 to 78. Yes, question.
Yeah, I just want to check, will you be able to share the presentation?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We're recording it, don't worry.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. Um, so this is, I put manuscript, this is an actual manuscript. These are reviewer comments. So, the reviewer, this is exactly how they've written them. And you'll find reviewers often have spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes and stuff in there. I always leave them in there. This is what you gave me. Expand the findings on the use of mega events on host communities. No full stop. It's terrible. Interesting point, read key field level governance actors. So like that point, there's nothing to respond to there, but it's a positive. So the psychology of all of this with the editor-in-chief, the editor-in-chief is looking at that and going, okay, so they like that. It's part of that, building that sort of positive mindset. And you're saying, you're responding to this. Thank you for this point. We've now identified the key field level governance actors we're referring to. Alterations, please see lines 560 to 562. And that's lines 560 to 562 right there. And the highlight signifies new text. So they've asked us to identify who the key actors are. In the original manuscript, we just said key field level governance actors, didn't actually name them. In the revision, we've named them, so I've highlighted that. Where you make no change, even where you've made no change, say so. And that's just conveying your attention to detail. You've left no stone unturned. Okay, so do I have to agree with all of the reviewers' comments? And I think I've kind of foreshadowed this already. So just let me share this with you. I'm looking at the time, it's gone really quick. Not sure you can actually read that. Can I look at it? Oh, I can, yeah. So this is me responding to reviewers. So this is the editor's summation. I agree with both reviewers in terms of the strengths of this manuscript. However, both reviewers also point out the need for significant revisions. Right, so I've said, I thank the editor and both reviewers for their feedback on this manuscript. Without being obsequious and without being false, you always want to be polite and thank you. This is great. You've improved the manuscript. So for this one, we're looking at examples of where we might not necessarily agree with the reviewer. So the reviewer here has said, with your content analysis, not quite happy with it. How about you look at the work of Clark and Braun? So I've gone and looked at Clark and Braun, and I've said, no, I actually don't like it. It doesn't fit. But I've said, and I've said that to them, I've said, however, with respect, this just doesn't work for us. And here's why. And I've shown them that I've read and digested Clark and Braun's work and explained why I'm not going to use it and what I am going to do. So you can disagree with a reviewer so long as you go to the nth degree to explain to them why you disagree with them and do it in a respectful way. You're not sort of flipping them the bird, or you don't want to make them feel like you're being rude. But you can disagree with them. Just make sure you justify it. And then, so here I said, I'm still not convinced that the research question is clearly articulated nor accurately represents the goals of the study. Additionally, there is some misalignment between the stated purpose, results, and discussion. And then a bit further down, they say it's unclear how Edwards' model connected to the discussion and how I presented the results. But what I did was, and I explain it here, the findings of, as stated above, the findings of this study demonstrate Edwards' framework is robust. It's fine. With this in mind, and with respect, a revised model would seem redundant, because what they were saying was, you know, give us the revisions to the model. And I was saying, this study proved that the model is robust. It doesn't need revisions. That was my point. You know, it was an empirical application of a model. So again, you know, on this basis, I believe the current presentation of results is already, and this is the words of the reviewer, explicitly connected to the conceptual model. So again, I'm saying, I take your point, but here's my counter argument to that. You know, so I didn't roll over and, you know, just make changes for the sake of making changes. You never want to do that. You know, at the same time, you do have to be open, like these are experts in the field. But if the changes aren't warranted, then they're not warranted. Again, this is the same manuscript after the next review, the next revision. And reviewer 2, I'd like to thank the authors for submitting a significantly improved manuscript. So again, I've left in that sort of little bit of positivity. A lot of people leave that out and think, oh, there's nothing for me to respond to there. There is, like, put it there. It's part of the psychology here. You know, I just said my thanks to reviewer 2 for very encouraging feedback on this manuscript. No change. So the editor looks at that and thinks, oh, wow, they're doing well. Honesty. So reviewer 2 again. I still argue that the authors could potentially further critique Edwards' model. Remember, it wants me to. I actually think this was Edwards.
Yeah.
And I know that this person, and I'm pretty sure it was him. So I said, okay, so to address reviewer 2's concerns here, I've added table 3. So I added a table and I just sort of made it even more, I explicated even more. Okay, well, maybe here's some more implications. And then I said, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure if this is what reviewer 2 wanted here. But to lay my cards on the table, is this what you want? I didn't get it back again. It got published. So I'm guessing that was fine. But again, you know, I wasn't rolling over. I was trying to work with them. This is another manuscript here. So for this one, they were really worried about the data being old. So this was based on an event that happened 5 years prior to the submission of this article. So I said, thank you for the positive synopsis of the reviewer's feedback. Regarding whether it's still relevant given the length of time since the data were collected, we argue that yes, the findings are still entirely relevant. Please see our explanation below. Oh, sorry, I'll just show you this manuscript before I get onto that. So see how I've numbered the lines? Again, it's a minor thing, but it makes it so much easier just to say, please see changes made on, you know, lines 114 to 118. You know, so it just makes things so much more efficient. Again, minor tip. just reminding you, always include the polite preambles. So, reviewer one. So the editor has said the reviewers are a bit worried about the age of the data. And this is reviewer one. Thank you for the opportunity to review the submission, which is very well written and interesting. My main question is around the length of time since the data were collected. So I've said, thank you for the positive feedback. Regarding your point on the dated nature of findings, we respectfully argue that 2018 is really not that long ago. And I point out that, here's a manuscript. That was another one of my PhD students, actually, but they didn't know that was me. But it was published in an A-star journal, and it was based, and recently at that time, and it was based on the 2007, how long ago was that? ICC Cricket World Cup. Similarly, another article was published in an A-ranked journal based on the same event that we're looking at in this manuscript, and that was published recently. So that's me saying this is still current. Other well-recognized journals are publishing data, research based on data of this age and even older. We come back to that point. And this is, like you might think, wow, you're being really verbose here and, it's a long response. But remember, even in responding to a reviewer, you're also speaking to your editor. You're speaking through the reviewer. So a reviewer might reject your rationale, but if it's clear to the editor, they will push back against them and say, well, hang on, have a look at this, or what about that? So, you're trying to create allies where you can. So that is a key point. So this point here now comes up here. So they also critique us on this including legacy. And I said, thank you for pointing this out, but there's a slight misunderstanding here, which is entirely our fault. Not really, but that's me throwing them a bone. It's entirely our fault, but it was never our intention to measure or explicitly examine the so-called legacies from GC 2018. That's the Commonwealth Games of 2018. And to us, that was already patently obvious if they just read it properly. But trying to be polite here, biting my tongue and smiling at the same time, I've explained it. But I've also said, please see this new bit that we've put in to further emphasize this point. So, it's about placating them and giving them information. So you'll notice that and giving them, essentially what they're asking for. That was the first submission of that manuscript. You'll see this is revision one. The editor's feedback. It's clear that there's been a robust discussion between the reviewers and yourself. There are times where I feel you've been slightly disrespectful. I read that and went, oh no, I've shot myself in the foot here. I thought I was done. Is it okay if I keep going?
If people need to leave, that's fine, but yeah, do carry on.
So I didn't give them anything. I did, but I didn't roll over. I stuck to my guns here, and this manuscript was based on my PhD, one of my old PhD students who came out of his PhD completely burnt out. He didn't want to go into academia. He wanted nothing to do with his PhD anymore. But his thesis was so good. I asked him, and that's why it took 5 years. I went to him and I said, Andrew, can I convert some of your thesis into a publication? We need to get at least one publication out of this. And it was, yeah. But he'd already gone on to a job in the Netherlands at the time, working as a business analyst in a health system. he said, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to contribute. And I said, that's fine. He's still first author because it's his work that we derive this from. But so that's why I was essentially driving this and writing this, although it was from Andrew's thesis. Yeah, so my response to that really tricky comment of you've been disrespectful. So I had to really eat humble pie. Said apologies if there was that perception of disrespect. This was not at all our intention. We're just at a loss as to how to address this point about the data being collected in 2018 any more than we already have. So I'm just being honest. So I said, okay, we've added this, we've added limitations and further research. So we put it in to the limitations section at the end. This data is from 2018, but we said it's still relevant. And, you know, at the time, I don't know what you know about mega events, but the 2026 Commonwealth Games were supposed to be in Melbourne this year. And the Victorian government pulled out, said it's too expensive, not going to do it. So everything we were talking about is still relevant, and I referred to that situation that was evolving at the time as well. He said, and the editor said, also address reviewer two's other comments as well. So I said, yep, done that. And said, this was a good point. Again, you know, let's go. Awesome. Reviewer one came back and said, thank you for considering the comments and feedback I've provided. I can see that you've addressed much of the feedback. Thank you, we've done our best. In relation to the age of the data, you've argued with both me and the editor that this shouldn't be a concern. Again, I'm just going, ooh, I might have stepped too heavily there. They just said, I believe you need to include justification in the paper. So again, that's why I put that last bit in there. Ultimately, it was all worth it in the end. That was that paper, and this was the other paper that were published, both A-level journals. So ultimately, was able to lay back and go, oh, thank you. Okay. We're getting to the end, guys. Sorry to have gone a bit over time. So what if it didn't go my way, our way, and you get a rejection? It's not the end of the world. There's any number of reasons why that might have happened. It might have just been a poor fit. It might be seen as not continuing or not contributing to the particular dialogues within that journal. Again, speaks to perhaps not a great fit. Maybe they just couldn't find peer reviewers at the time. Maybe it's too similar to one of your earlier publications, and I've seen that happen as well. And, you know, it can be a bit of a political process. Maybe you're just not known to the editors. And, you know, again, if it's kind of an edgy, innovative piece, they might think, nah, that's too far out of scope for us. So there's any number of reasons why that might not necessarily be anything to do with the quality of your work. So keep your chin up and don't let it get you down too much. But do think, what am I going to do now? First thing to do is just to chill out. Don't send an angry email back to the editor saying, you don't know what you're talking about. This is a great manuscript. No, don't do that. Take a few days to a week before you even think about responding. Evaluate the decision. Once you cool down, you know, try to work out, okay, was it a desk reject or was it a peer-reviewed reject? If it was a peer-reviewed reject, read that feedback. Do they have some good points? I bet they do. Never been through this process where it hasn't improved the manuscript. It always improves your work. So there could be valid points. There could be recurring themes that, you know, you could sort of recycle that information into a resubmission somewhere else. So, you know, absolutely all is not lost. With your co-authors, decide a course of action. Are you going to revise and resubmit to another journal? If so, you know, are you going to reconceptualize that piece, or are you going to stick to that core argument and just try it somewhere else? That's a key decision to make. Are you going to appeal the decision? That's a really risky one. And to be honest, I've never seen it happen where it's been successful. It would take exceptional circumstances such as, you know, the reviewer was biased or misread, didn't understand, and again, the burden of proof there is pretty high and pretty difficult. So that's a very hard one. If you decide to target a new journal, analyze the reference list of your manuscript and create a short list of, you know, what journals are popping up a lot in your reference list. That's a good indicator that, well, maybe this is a good fit there. Look at the authors of who they are. Are they on the editorial boards of any of these journals? And make sure the aim, scope, editorial guidelines of your new target are a strong fit for your work. Yes.
How do you find out who are the editorials? Because I know within the journal there is the editorial board or something, but then from your reference list, from the authors, that's a lot of basically
Well,
stalking. That's a lot of work.
yeah, it is. There is a lot of work. Yeah, it can be very laborious, but if you're just looking for the key authors, like the seminal pieces that your work is based upon, there won't be that many authors there. And you will be able to look up, you know, if there's 5 or 6 key pieces that your work is based on, you're talking maybe, you know, 10 to 15 authors there. You know, that's not too much work to look up where they are. And you know, are they on the editorial boards of these journals?
Would that be on mostly their profiles, their university profiles, on their link?
I would go to that, but I would just go to the journal homepages, and they'll always have, you know, instructions for authors, and there'll be a link to editorial board, so you can actually have a look. It's on there. Ad hoc reviewers could be anyone, so you can't track them, but always you can find out who's on the editorial board. But above all, don't take it personally. There's no conspiracies at work here. It really is something that everyone has to deal with. And you know, at the end of the day, just keep writing and crack on. You know, it's not the end of the world. It will, you know, the world will keep spinning, and so will you. That's it, guys. And again, apologies for going 10 minutes over here. Any other questions? Yes.
Your experience being an editorial boards, what are like the key reasons why there's holdups in that process? And I'm talking like several weeks to move just from the editor to reviewers and then being under review for so long. Like what? Obviously, there's a lot kind of going on behind the scenes, but what is
it? From my observations, the key holdups are when reviewers ghost editors, or they say, yeah, I can. Like typically, you get a month. Some journals you get 2 weeks. 2 weeks is not enough. But typically it's a month, and sometimes you'll get reviewers who will ghost the editors. They'll say, yes, I can do it. And then 2 months down the track, they still haven't turned it around, got it back. So that's the typical, usual reason.
so you can start panicking, thinking maybe it's going to get rejected, or you know, wondering what's.
Yeah. It just plays havoc with your mind of, you know, what's going on. But you know, you're well within your rights once you know, you'll get the letter back saying it's under revision, and you'll be able to track it inevitably, you know, on their website of where it's at, and you know, you'll see, oh, it's still under review. If it's over a month, you're well within your rights to email the editor and say, you know, just politely, you know, just a polite query, can you tell me where my manuscript's at and perhaps what the expectation of when I might get it back is. You know, totally within your rights to do that.
One mine, it's been a year now.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I have had one like that. It just kept going on and on and on. And then it finally came back and it was a reject. So, that was so frustrating and so demoralizing. But you know, so I'm speaking from experience. Yeah, you just have to resolve. I'm not going back to that journal. But it does happen. I did want to. I know we're out of time. This is not a long story, so don't worry. But talking about responding to examiners. So I had a PhD student over 10 years ago now, but it always sticks with me. The examiner's comments came back and he was furious and did not take the feedback well. And I didn't realize how furious he was. He went away, came back, and his response, like did the template and everything, but it was outright abusive. And, you know, didn't use the F-bomb or any other, you know, inappropriate language, but he might as well have. And, you know, as had to go in and say, I'm not going to say his name, but, you know, calm down. This is not going to get you anywhere. At the end of the day, you want this thesis to go through. Think of the bigger picture. Put your ego to the side and just address the feedback. Take the emotion out of it. It is so hard. And you'll be dealing with different personalities as your co-authors, even their examiners and reviewers, you know. But there's egos on every corner. You've got to learn how to sidestep them and where and when to put yours to the side. So you know, that's a big hurdle here. Yeah.
While most journals are such that they're not double-blind peer review, so that the reviewers can see your application, your university, in the sense that, let's say, if you are from a high-rank university, then they are cautious in giving feedbacks. But if you're not,
They shouldn't know. It should.
but
In the
90%
double-blind,
of the journals in my field, all of them are single-blind peer review.
Really?
So yes, so that the reviewers can see the applications and names of the authors.
Really?
Yes.
Oh wow! In my field, I have no experience of that. Everything is blind in my field. So yeah, I can't offer any advice there. That's to me that's crazy.
Yeah, because sometimes it becomes biased. They go
Yeah.
and search your name. If they see you have publications, then they're a little bit cautious in commenting.
And that's the whole reason for double-blind reviewing, so that you know it takes that bias out of it. Quite often, I cannot quite often pick who the author is when I'm reviewing a manuscript. But you know, you don't know for sure. But yeah, sorry, I have no experience of that. Everything I've ever dealt with has been totally blind reviewing. Yeah.
So the editorial process, it goes to the chief editor, who gives it to an associate editor, then they find the reviewers.
Yeah.
Does the
Smaller journals that might be handled by an editor-in-chief.
does the associate editor read it too, or do they just look at the reviewer's comments and go, it must be good, and then pass it to the chief editor and then publish?
Yeah. Well, the associate, it will go back to the editor-in-chief with a recommendation from the handling editor. Ideally, the handling editor will have read it as well. The editor-in-chief might have just scanned it, looked at the topic, gone, yeah, okay, it's appropriate there. But yeah, the handling editor absolutely should have read it.
And then one of the reviewers is also on the editorial board, or is it the associate editor that's on the editorial board?
But at least one of the reviewers will be on the editorial board as well. Usually,
So it's the
Sometimes there's none available, so they have to use totally ad hoc reviewers. But yeah, that's why a lot of editorial boards are quite large now, and that's where opportunities come up for you guys too. You know, where they are looking for reviewers on some journals, and you know, the offer might come across. You know, do you want to join this editorial board? It's another feather in your cap on your CV. You know, to say you've got that, and even you know, to do ad hoc reviews, it's good to have on your CV that you're respected.
Yeah.
To you know, your opinion is that valued. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, guys? Thank you so much. And again, my apologies for going over